You are now tuned in to DameSmiff.
Welcome to Musician Talks with DameSmiff. This is episode 41. I want to talk to you today about branding as an artist. And before I get started, make sure you like, share, and subscribe, and share this video with anybody who's interested in the music industry, strengthening their soft skills as a musician, or just want to learn about how creatives today function in today's society. So, like I said, I want to talk about branding, and I want to speak about how an artist can approach branding themselves today in the music industry. So, for me, there are particularly three different categories that I look at for branding. There's the genre that you can become a master in. There's the skill or instrument or talent that you can master. And then there's the aesthetic that you bring as an artist, the visual aesthetic that you bring as an artist. So typically, this would look completely different for every other artist, all three of those. But let's start with mastering a genre. So in order for people to identify you simply by, like if I had no connection to the music industry and I was just a random music fan that's just walking down the street, how could I identify you? Well, one of the things is becoming very proficient in the genre that you are a master in. So if you're a jazz musician, you don't necessarily have to be the greatest jazz musician if you can prove and showcase that you know who are the movers and shakers of the genre. You can connect with the right people in the genre, and you can also represent how this genre it brings a positivity to the society as a whole. Now, that approach can be taken a lot of different ways. Meaning, you can do that by just simply networking with the right people, coordinating with the right people, or being so effective in this genre that it's almost impossible to ignore your efforts. Now, that will be important for many artists because that is something that can be I would say the easiest approach, but it's sometimes for artists we like to call it putting ourselves in a box. So it doesn't necessarily feel good to do it, but it is the easiest approach to learn how to brand yourself. You'll see it a lot with guitar players. Well, they'll stick to maybe two genres that they're good at, but there's usually between the two, one that they're really, really dedicated towards in terms of time and investment. And then the second category I would like to talk about is your skill set or talent as an artist and learning how to master that for branding. So what that would look like is if you're a piano player and you get really, really proficient in your instrument, hiring you for piano gigs gets a lot easier. But that's just anything that has to do with pianos or utilizing a piano. So that can transcend genres. Like I said in the first category, where your main focus is genre. So now you've transcended beyond trying to play and master in one genre or one community in music. And this approach can be very useful for artists because this can open more doors than would previously be open for you if you were only good at one genre. And this is the sweet spot for most artists, especially instrumentalists, because you can become a utility in so many ways for people, being audio recordings, studio recordings, and things like that, as well as live performances and the ability to play in many different ensembles. Now, the third category, visual aesthetics for an artist, is, I would personally say, is the hardest approach because the lack of consistency in there. Now, for many, to be able to maintain a specific look can be hard unless you had some kind of knowledge on how image works for a person and what that can represent for them. But this is something that's hard to maintain because fashion trends change, times change, even sounds may change. And so the look and culture of what's creating the new hot sound may not necessarily be what is in your wheelhouse as an artist. So this approach really works well for pop artists because they have a high level of visual investment versus, being like a hip hop artist that wants to maintain a certain look where the genre of hip hop isn't really based in your looks. It's more based in like skill set and things like that. So this is really important for art. This approach is really important for artists, especially if you're able to get a master on the first two categories. Like you can get a master on the genre you play in, as well as the skill set you bring to the table. Now, the aesthetic part can be done in conjunction with the other two categories, but trying to maintain all of that takes a lot of investment and it takes a lot of consistency. That of which average musicians don't necessarily have. We don't have a lot of time to spend, our own hard-earned dollars, which this problem gets solved with typically a label, or maybe you can dedicate a department if you're running your own indie label and things like that that can help you work on these things. But aesthetics for an artist plays a big role in people just seeing you and wanting to learn about you before they even hear your music or hear you sing or anything like that. And that's even before they even know what genre you perform in. So you can see rock musicians wearing, very eye-catching clothing, but before you even hear them pick up a guitar and play a note, you can understand that they represent, what they represent, i.e. music or the specific genre they play, or even just the instrument. So I want to bring an example in where you can look at an artist like, let's say, JayZ for an instance. His music career has been very consistent in the visual aesthetic there, where for many artists it has changed over the years. So for him, he was able to maintain the visual aesthetic, the skill set being that his vocal abilities is held to high regard, and then within the genre he performs in, his efforts are held to a high regard because of the consistency he's had in that particular genre, which in this instance would be hip hop. So being able to spin all three of those plates, you can see just by looking at his resume how much investment has to really go into maintaining those three categories for an artist. And that's just one artist. Now, if you have a situation like a band or an ensemble, this is something to really think about in depth, in way more detail, because you're now dealing with maybe 4, 5, 6, 7 people plus auxiliary positions as well, like your roadies or your tour manager and things like that. All of that goes into branding and understanding that you're in control of that as an artist grants you a lot of power as an artist. So I want to pose a question. As an artist, if you're a musician out there, what are some things you look for in other artists that is important to you? Is it the genre they play in? Is it the mastery of the skill set or instrument or talent that they have? Is it the aesthetic, or is it a combination of all three, or one or two? So that's all I have for you today. This was Musician Talks with DameSmiff. This was episode 41, and we talked about branding. And like I said, be sure to like, share, and subscribe, and share this video with anybody who's interested in the music industry, being creative, or learning about the music life out there today. And that's me.